As we come to our first part of the message, as we've been going through the grace of Christmas, we started the series with Harold and his kind of lack of grace. We then heard about Joseph, how he stepped into grace, particularly in the role of being a stepdad. And then last week we looked at Mary, displays grace through her humility and faithfulness. Well, this morning we're going to be looking at Jesus, and what could we possibly learn about grace from Jesus? Eh? In fact, there is quite a lot. So I wanted to pitch the question this morning: what can we learn about God's grace in the fact that Jesus had to come in the form of a baby's body? Why did he have to come as a baby? Why, we read through the Old Testament of different ways that God interacts with his people and angels, and why did he have to come as a baby boy? We spent a lot of time last year looking through Matthew, and I wanted to just look at Luke's observation of the story of Jesus' birth, and we pick it up from Luke 2. The story goes like this. So Joseph also went up to a town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judah, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. He went there to register Mary, who was pledged to be married to him, and was expected a child. While they were there, the time had come for the baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him in cloth and placed him in a manger, because there was no guest room available for them. There is. Done and dusted. Pretty simple. Kind of written like a real bloke. This happened. We don't get too much more. It's kind of like me when if I was to explain, I guess, the birth of Skylar, our firstborn. We told people at Christmas time. It got closer and closer to the date. We were getting more and more eager. It was actually supposed to be born on Jane's birthday. She was, and she didn't come then. So we got induced. A few hours later, there she was. But you can say it like that. But here's a picture I'm going to have up of actually how I felt. And what did I do? I didn't really do much. But that is me holding Skylar. It's all in the eyes. I didn't have time to take a photo 2 months later where it would be even more shocking. We can read these things and quickly just go, oh yeah, that's a nice story. But the truth behind... we can get it down now. The truth behind the matter is there's a lot more going on in the scenes. And babies, hey, that's before it all began. Like, babies are messy. They poo a lot. They cry a lot. There's a lot going on. So why did God have to come in the form of a baby? Every Christmas, I like to picture. I heard this sermon once about Jesus coming down from heaven to be a baby. And it's a picture of him stripping off his glory as he comes down from heaven into this form of a baby being birthed. And I think it's a great picture of the extent that God would go to, that he would strip his glory and come down into the mess. And the mess of a manger, I think last week Renata put it well, of just the situation and the shepherds being there, and it's not being a great experience. I mean, we get hospitals and things these days. That was something else. But it also shows us the fact that God would come into the mess. He would go that far. And really that is the message of why he would go to those lengths. See, God doesn't want to take a shortcut with us. He doesn't want to take the easy road. He wants a relationship with us, and he goes to extraordinary lengths to show that. And this is the heart of what the Christmas story is all about. It's the end game of grace. Jesus coming in a baby's body to demonstrate God's sacrificial love for us. We read in Galatians 4:4-5, it says, and Bruce actually shared it this morning before we had our prayer time. But when the set time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship. That's really important, that point there, that he was born under the law. He was born under the same situations, the same circumstances as we are. He understands what life is like. He grew up. He understands what we go through. And that part there, receiving adoption into sonship. This is the best part, because Jesus' life, the way he lived, the way that he loved, and the way that he sacrificed, no matter what our mess, we have a relationship with God. And Matt's actually going to talk a bit more about this in part 2. But I just wanted to say, sometimes I can find that hard to relate to Jesus. The fact that he walked this earth and made all the right choices, seemed to do everything right. And of course, that's partly because he is God. But again, we can quickly gloss over the stories and not realize the heart and the intent that Jesus would have had to experience to make those decisions, to grow up, seeing the hardship around him, seeing the tragedy around him, knowing that he was going to do something about it, but it wasn't yet his time, knowing the sacrifice that he was going to have to make to sort all this out. It can be, like I say, it can be hard sometimes to relate to those choices that Jesus made. And Maria and I have been watching this Netflix series called The Crown, which I don't know if some have watched, but it's all about, and we've only watched the first the first season, so I don't know where it goes from there. But it does give you a bit of a picture of the royal family, and I guess their ambition to try and hold a certain standard, and the sacrifices and the choices they have to make on the way. And it's something that a lot of us, we don't live up to. And that's why we have Jesus to give us that example. Another passage that I misunderstood, I don't know if many others do, but is Romans 5:7-8. And it's a great passage. It says, "Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." Always took that last bit there, while we were still sinners, to kind of see that as a gap between us and God, that while we're still sinners, we're a stranger to God. But actually it's the reverse. The story of Christmas shows the lengths of love that God would go to know us, to be in relationship with us. That he's not dying for us not knowing us, he's dying for us knowing us fully. You know, as a dad now, when I watch a lot of kids' movies, they always have these heroic scenes at the end where the dad or one of the characters you're invested in will die for, or will sacrifice for their family or for whatever it is. And yeah, I think it's the Crods, or that one got me really bad. But it shows. I did cry, I did. And it was Nicolas Cage too. I was like, what's going on? He makes this heroic thing to save his family. But what I wanted to say is that's what Jesus does. He knows us. He's not some strange character. He actually died for us, knowing us full well and wanting to do that. Jesus understands what life is like for us. And he died for you and me, wanting to, and whether we acknowledge that level of sacrificial love or not, whether we understand it or not, he still did that for us. And he invites us as his children, that adoption into sonship, to do the same. So the other part I find fascinating about the Christmas story, the grace story, is how much God is willing to entrust us to be part of that story. Entrusting Mary and Joseph to raise the Son of God. And of course, we see many other examples of Jesus doing this with his disciples. We read in Corinthians, "For we are co-workers in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder. Someone else is building on it. But each one should build with care, for no one can lay a foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ." That foundation here we see very clearly is God's willingness to die for us, his willingness in sacrificial love for us. The Old Testament really tries to communicate to us God's heart. He's trying to tell us to care for the poor, to care for others, to look at other people's mess and be willing to be in it. But people still didn't get it. So he sent his Son to demonstrate it. And we see all through the Gospels how Jesus was with people that you just don't expect, because that was God's heart, to care and to love for each person. Now, we're talking a bit about a few movies and things I've been watching. One I wanted to share as a bit of an example for this is the show Bluey. Does anyone here seen the show Bluey? Put your hand up. All right, half. Oh, yes, up the back at the kids' table. We've got a lot of hands raised. All right, so not everyone knows Bluey. Bluey's a family of blue healers, similar to my family, actually. Mum and dad, 2 little girls about the same age as my little girls. All right, so maybe you haven't heard of Bluey. Who has heard of the Women's Weekly Birthday Cake Recipe Book? Who's heard of that? All right, a different set of hands just went up. Yes, I remember that cake book. I remember getting the soccer ball and the lion face. I think my brother got a duck cake, and that's what this episode of Bluey was about. It's about the duck cake. And it goes a bit like this. It's set up that it's Bingo's birthday. That's the youngest, the 3-year-old. And the dad gets tasked to build the cake, to make the cake. But of course, and yes, this is a picture of the cake. This is the cake he needs to make. While this is happening, Bluey, the eldest daughter, is asked, all right, you need to clean up your mess. She goes, I don't want to clean up my mess. And particularly, I don't want to clean up Bingo's mess. And so the dad says, all right, just clean up your own mess. So, all right, she goes to cleaning up her mess. He goes to build the cake. And, of course, she gets distracted. I've done. I don't want to do anymore. The dad goes, look, I'll give you a sticker. If you clean up your mess, I'll give you a sticker. She goes, all right, yes, all right. She gets one sticker, and then she goes, all right, no, I don't want to do it anymore. That's fine, I don't want any stickers. All right, I'll give you $2 if you clean up your mess. Any parents just sounding familiar? She goes, oh, great. How many horsies can I buy with that? Or some toy? And he's like, no, that's $50. Oh, all right, no, I'm not want to do that. All right, you can lick the beaters. Oh, yes, I'll clean up my mess. So that's the wrestle going on there. Meanwhile, he's trying to make this cake. And, you know, I haven't made too many cakes, but when I try and cook things, there's usually things I do miss off, and he cuts the cake a bit wrong, and he ices it before it's supposed to be iced, and he gets to the final point, though, where putting the head on the duck. And he goes to put the skewer in, and as he goes to put it in, slop, oh, cake on the floor. He's knocked the head off, the cake's on the floor. Bingo's there watching, Bluey's there watching, and she sees her dad just go, I'm defeated. This cake has defeated me. Anyone felt like a recipe has defeated? No, okay, just me. No, there's a couple of others. Bluey sees this, sees the mess on the floor, sees her dad like that, and goes, it's all right, Dad. We'll just make the neck into the head. It'll work. He goes, all right, yep, let's do that. And as he gets up, he goes, all right, I need to clean up my mess first. And he sees the mess is clean. He's like, Bluey, did you just clean up that mess? And she goes, yeah. And he goes, thanks, Bluey. That's so helpful. And she realizes, actually, oh, that was good. That gave me a good feeling to do that, to see someone in need and to help. And so then, of course, she goes and she does clean up a mess, and she cleans up her sister's mess too. And the mum comes home and says, wow, this house is clean. Thanks, Bluey. And again, she feels that sense of joy. And I'm there as a dad going, girls, did you see that? You know, that is what we're called to do. That's what our Heavenly Father has done for us in Jesus. He's come and cleaned up our mess. He's seen us in our time of need, and he wants to be there with us in that. And he asks us to do that. A lot of the times we can get caught up in chasing the star, you know, wanting to be recognised, wanting to be appreciated. Sometimes we can get caught up in making money. Sometimes it's licking that success of the beaters. But it's actually when we see each other and we see the mess that can be about, and we're willing to step in and journey with people, that we really see God's kingdom come alive. When we're willing to lay down our path, our life for others, is when God, what he invites us to be part of. It's what the Christmas message, and that's what grace is all about. Maybe this Christmas, we need to be careful not to get caught up in the busyness. We might need to lay down some traditions we have that actually distance us from others. Maybe it's the comforts. as we come into a discussion time, what is the ways that we can demonstrate love this Christmas? Matt's going to talk a little bit more in part 2, but as we discuss here, I want to leave you with these 2 questions. When have you seen sacrificial love demonstrated, and what happened when you demonstrated sacrificial love? I want to get some conversation going around the tables and online if you want to comment or if you've got people to chat to. As we understand this story of Christmas, this grace of God knowing us and sending his Son to understand us, where do we then see sacrificial love demonstrated today? And what's been your experience with it? Let's have a time now to chat.
If you've got your Bibles, turn with me to John chapter 1. Now, we get what we understand the Christmas story to be largely from the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. Mark is a much shorter Gospel and gets straight to business and kind of skips it over. But John is a Gospel that's written later. It's most likely that John had the other Gospels to look at, and he's saying, I need to do a different kind of job. There are things that were missing that I need to make sure don't go missing. And so we get in John not the description of the story of Christmas, but the description of the meaning of Christmas. And so let's start with John chapter 1, verse 1. And the first 3 words are, in the beginning. Do you know any other Bible book that starts with those 3 words? Do you think that's an accident? No, it's not. What John is making clear his readers understand is the birth of the baby in Bethlehem was a seismic event for the whole of the cosmos. And the creation is being renewed. And the story of John's Gospel is the story of new creation. That in Jesus, new creation is born. He's very clearly referencing Genesis there and saying that this is the renewal of what was lost in the garden. And you'll see that theme right the way through the book of John. He says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. What John is wanting us to understand, that this story we celebrate at Christmas is the central story of everything. It is the central story of life. And it's good for me to come back and keep hearing those words, in him was life. You see, most of us have experienced a difficult year. It's been a complicated year for most people. Some people have kind of enjoyed it all, the challenge of it all, but for most people it's been a difficult year. And for many of us, we've had challenges in this past year where it's been kind of hard to know how to find the love, joy, peace that we're promised at Christmas, and hope of the candles. But here John tells us this is where you find it. In this fragile little baby born at Bethlehem, who would grow up to be the carpenter that walks the shore of Galilee. He is the centre of everything. John is this is how he starts his gospel. He's wanting us to understand just how big a deal Christmas really is. It's not just a nice story about a little baby. It is the story of the dividing line of history, is what John is wanting us to see. We're going to, for the sake of time, just dart down to verse 11. I would love just to spend a couple of months just on John chapter 1. There is every word conveys, because as I was saying, John has taken great care with each word, and every word conveys significant meaning. But in verse 11, what we see is a truth, a truth we see in the Christmas story. He came to that which was his own, but his own didn't receive him. There was no room at the inn. The Pharisees and the Sadducees had other things to do. Herod was preoccupied. His own didn't receive him. And the central point of the Christmas story is, I think, for us, how are you going at making space for him? How are you going at making space for him? You see, John now goes on and introduces the theme of the whole gospel in a sentence that he will repeat at the end of his gospel. He says, "Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believe in his name, he gave the right to be children of God." Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. Do you hear that? Matt last week, was the week before, I lose track. Renata was last week and Matt was the week before. Matt was talking about blended families and talking about the complexity of blended families. What does this verse say about a blended family? It says the church is a blended family. That as you believe in Jesus, you are welcomed into the family. Not because of who your dad is, not because of how clever you are, but you are adopted. And the church is meant to be this big blend of people from all kinds of different backgrounds. And you get to be God's kid because of who he is. So how do you get to be God's kid? Well, it says, to those who believed. And to those who believed in his name. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? What does that mean? Does that mean all you needed to do is believe that his name was Jesus and you're in? What does it mean to believe in his name? Again, important to understand what in Hebrew the name, believing in someone's name means, or someone's name means. It is not just the letters or the word that is their name, it is their character. It is the totality of who he is. And you'll see John is using this language very carefully. Just quickly keep your finger here and flip over to John chapter 20.
I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, I figured, Siri, that I know you've got issues. John chapter 20 and verse 31. You'll see that this first verse in chapter 1 is like a bookend, and this later verse is like the end of the book. And what John is saying is to believe in Jesus' name means, what he says in verse 31 of chapter 20, these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and see if this sounds familiar, by believing you may have life in his name. So what John is saying is that the whole gospel from 1 to 20 is the description of his name. It's the description of who he is and what he came to do. And so as you open yourself to who Jesus is, this historic Jewish person who stands in the middle of history and declares himself the Son of God, what John is saying is the path to life is to believe in him, to believe in who he is, in who he has revealed himself to be. In this book, Jesus will actually say, in the Gospel of John, Jesus will say, if you look at me, you are seeing God. Is what he'll say. So what does it actually mean to believe in Jesus? For most of us who would regularly turn up at a church, we would probably say, well, there was a moment where I believed in Jesus. There was a moment where I said, I gave my life to Jesus. And that is the most precious moment of your life, where you say, I am going to step over a line, and Jesus, I want your life to be my life. And if you haven't yet had that conversation with Jesus, can I encourage you, don't waste time. If you're watching online and you haven't yet had that conversation with Jesus, please don't waste time. Have that conversation with Jesus. And as you open yourself to Jesus, you'll find an adventure starts. If you have done that, but you haven't been baptized, the Bible's also very clear about what needs to happen next. The baptism is the sign and symbol of what has happened inside, in a way that you are saying to the whole world, I no longer live for me, but I live for Jesus. But is that the end of believing in Jesus? Is that the extent of what it means to believe in Jesus? To say, Jesus, come into my heart? One of the quotes that we use in the Foundations course when we teach it is by a Spanish poet and philosopher, Antonio Machado. And what he says is that under all we think, behind your very thoughts, lies what you actually believe. Like the ultimate veil of our spirits. Like behind your thoughts, because we, in the Western world, we elevate our thinking, but behind your thoughts is what you actually believe. There's I've mentioned it before, and I'll just touch on it briefly, but there's a development organisation that has done work on trying to work out how do you help communities be healthy. And what they came up with is a picture of a tree. And if what they say is that in your life, the most important thing about you are your beliefs. Your beliefs are the fabric, they are what you assume to be true of the world. And what they say is your beliefs produce your values, and your values are what you value. So for some of us, we value family as a central thing, so Christmas is the most important time of the day, time of the year. For others, there are other values, so Christmas is not as significant. Does that make sense? We have different values based on what our different beliefs are. Now, from our values come our actions. And from our actions becomes what happens in our lives. And the story of Christmas is the story of a baby who comes not just to focus on your actions, but the story of a baby who becomes a man who says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He comes to focus on your beliefs. And I know it's been a helpful thing for me just to keep discovering that, I don't know how it works, maybe it's not like this for you, but I find that the more I let Jesus grab my hand, the more I discover I have wrong beliefs. The more I discover that there are things in me that are not yet sorted. What do I mean by that? Do you know that have you noticed, it's one thing to know, isn't it? You can know, and in fact you can intellectually believe that God can be trusted. Isn't that true? Isn't it a different thing to actually trust God? You can know and you can intellectually believe that God is love. Isn't it a different thing to know deep in your heart that you are loved and that you are valuable? That Christmas comes every year as a moment of grace to remind us that God doesn't stand back and say, get your act together. No, God steps into the mess, into the pain and the chaos of our world, in the shape of a little baby, and says, this is how much I love you. But the central question for me and for you with Christmas is this. Are you ready to believe in Jesus? Are you ready to face the parts of you that are not yet free? The parts of you that, if you're to be honest, don't completely believe. Because Jesus says he is the light, and he is the one that will help bring life and freedom into the dark places of your life. And while it is a remarkable moment that when you invite Jesus into your heart and begin the adventure, there's nothing better other than the reality that as you take this adventure with Jesus and hold his hand, it's not like the race isn't done at the start. It's just the start of the adventure as you take his hand. And as you take his hand, you watch what he wants to do. He wants to gradually help you understand how much he loves you, how beautiful you are, and who he created you to be. And that happens as we look to him and love him. In just a minute, I'm going to invite the band up at Mornington, and they're going to sing a song. And after that, Dan will come and lead us in our Lord's Prayer as a way of wrapping up. But as Robin and Emily and the team come up to sing, I invite you just to listen to the lyrics of this song and understand just how big a deal Christmas is. Because the little baby that came to earth came for you, that you might have life. Let's not go into 2021 carrying any baggage we don't have to be carrying. As the bands sing and prepare to sing, I invite you just to quietly, you may want to write down, you might want to pray, but I invite you to bring to Jesus all the things that you're holding on to, all the places where you know you don't really believe, and lay them at the feet of the one who loves you. Let's listen and spend some time together in quiet reflection and prayer.